name's Melanie McGrath. I'm a local writer and author, and I was inspired to come to Stoke Newington partly because of this wonderful Abney Park that's so magical, and partly because of Stoke Newington's amazingly rich literary history, which includes one of my great heroines, literary heroines, Mary Wollstonecraft. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Mary, and then I will read to you from her most famous work, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and then I'm going to read a couple of the letters that she sent to her lover, Gilbert Imlay. So Mary was one of the earliest feminists and an advocate for equality of the sexes. She was born on the 27th of April 1759, one of 6 children in Hoxton, to Edward and Elizabeth. Her parents' marriage was unhappy and volatile. Edward was a big drinker, and Mary often witnessed the violence that he meted out upon Mary's mother. And I think that had an impact on her thoughts about marriage and about the equality of sexes. The family moved around a great deal. Edward found it difficult to stick to a job for very long, but eventually they settled back in Hoxton, where at the age of 16, Mary met Fanny Blood, and the two young women developed a very close relationship, bonded in part by their experience of having alcoholic fathers. Fanny was much better educated than Mary, and even then at the age of 16, she was a successful artist, and she was supporting her family financially, and this too, I think, was very instrumental in Mary's thinking about the independence, financial independence of women. In 1783, Mary and Fanny together set up a school for girls in Newington Green, just 10 minutes walk from here, and they became a group of radical thinkers, mostly dissenters, who were living around the Green at that time. And it was at this point that Mary began to think seriously about the importance of education for the independence of girls and women and for their freedom. And in 1789, at the age of 30, she decided to devote her life to literature and to make her living that way. And in 1792, she published her most famous work, Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which I'll be reading a couple of extracts from, which powerfully argued for equality among the sexes. And the book was very radical for its time, and it was received with a mixture of outrage, but also with enthusiasm, particularly within her own radical circles, and it made her a well-known figure around London. At the age of 33, Mary travelled to Paris in the midst of the French Revolution, and the following year she met Gilbert Imlay, an American. The two fell in love, and Mary gave birth to a daughter, who she called Fanny, after her great friend Fanny Blood. Gilbert Imlay was a businessman, and he was away for long periods of time. He was also a poor correspondent, a fact that drove Mary wild, as you'll hear in her letters in a moment. And she too travelled around Europe, to Scandinavia and around the Low Countries, often in the hope of meeting up with Gilbert Imlay en route, and was as often frustrated in that. And not surprisingly, the relationship came to an end. And later, back in London, Mary met another radical thinker, William Godwin. Like Mary and Gilbert Imlay, Mary and William Godwin never married. And Mary died tragically, giving birth to their daughter, also called Mary. The young Mary went on to become Mary Shelley, who was the author of Frankenstein. I'm going to read 3 very short extracts from A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Mary Wollstonecraft's most famous work. My own sex, I hope, will excuse me if I treat them like rational creatures instead of flattering their fascinating graces, and viewing them as if they were in a state of perpetual childhood, unable to stand alone. I earnestly wish to point out in what true dignity and human happiness consists. I wish to persuade women to endeavour to acquire strength, both of mind and body, and to convince them that the soft phrases, susceptibility of heart, delicacy of sentiment, and refinement of taste are almost synonymous with epithets of weakness, and that those beings who are only the objects of pity, and that kind of love which has been termed its sister will soon become objects of contempt. Dismissing then those pretty feminine phrases which the men condescendingly use to soften our slavish dependence, and despising that weak elegancy of mind, exquisite sensibility, and sweet docility of manners supposed to be the sexual characteristics of the weaker vessel, I wish to show that elegance is inferior to virtue, that the first object of laudable ambition is to obtain a character as a human being, regardless of the distinction of sex. The education of women has of late been more attended to than formerly, yet they are still reckoned a frivolous sex and ridiculed or pitied by the writers who endeavour by satire or instruction to improve them. It's acknowledged that they spend many of the first years of their lives in acquiring a smattering of accomplishments. Meanwhile, strength of body and mind are sacrificed to libertine notions of beauty, to the desire of establishing themselves the only way women can rise in this world, by marriage. And this desire making mere animals of them, when they marry, they act as children may be expected to act. They dress, they paint, and nickname God's creatures. Can they be expected to govern a family with judgment, or take care of the poor babes whom they bring into this world? The woman who strengthens her body and exercises her mind will, by managing her family and practicing various virtues, become the friend and not the humble dependent of her husband. And if she, by possessing such substantial qualities, merit his regard, she will not find it necessary to conceal her affection, nor to pretend to an unnatural coldness of constitution in order to excite her husband's passions. In fact, if we revert to history, we shall find that the women who have distinguished themselves have neither been the most beautiful nor the most gentle of their sex. Sunday night, Paris, 1793. I have just received your letter and feel as if I could not go to bed tranquilly without saying a few words in reply, merely to tell you that my mind is serene and my heart affectionate. Ever since you last saw me inclined to faint, I have felt some gentle twitches which make me begin to think that I am nourishing a creature who will soon be sensible of my care. This thought has not only produced an overflowing of tenderness to you, but made me very attentive to calm my mind and take exercise, lest I should destroy an object in whom we are to have a mutual interest, you know. Yesterday, do not smile, finding that I'd hurt myself by lifting a large log of wood, I sat down in an agony till I felt those said twitches again. Are you very busy? Be that as it may, write to me, my best love, and bid me be patient, kindly, and the expressions of kindness will again beguile the time as sweetly as they have done tonight. Tell me also, over and over again, that your happiness, and you deserve to be happy, is closely connected with mine, and I will try to dissipate as they rise the fumes of former discontent that have too often clouded the sunshine which you have endeavoured to diffuse through my mind. God bless you. Take care of yourself, and remember with tenderness your affectionate Mary. I'm going to rest very happy, and you've made me so. This is the kindest good night I can utter. Wednesday night, Paris, January the 1st, 1794. As I have been, you tell me, 3 days without writing, I ought not to complain of 2. Yet, as I expected to receive a letter this afternoon, I'm hurt. And why should I, by concealing it, affect the heroism I don't feel? I hate commerce. How differently must Blank's head and heart be organised from mine? You will tell me that exertions are necessary. I'm weary of them. The face of things, public and private, vexes me. The peace and clemency, which seemed to be dawning a few days ago, disappear again. I'm fallen, as Milton said, on evil days. For I really believe that Europe will be in a state of convulsion during half a century at least. Life is but a labour of patience. It's always rolling a great stone up a hill. For before a person can find a resting place, imagined it is lodged, down it comes again, and all the work is to be done over anew. Should I attempt to write any more, I would not change the strain. My head aches and my heart is heavy. The world appears an unweeded garden, where things rank and file flourish best. If you do not return soon, or, which is no such mighty matter, talk of it, I will throw your slippers out the window and be off. Nobody knows where. Mary. Finding that I was observed, I told the good women, the 2 Mrs. Blanks, simply that I was with child, and let them stare. And blank, nay, all the world may know it for aught I care. Considering the care and anxiety a woman must have about a child before it comes into the world, it seems to me by a natural right to belong to her. When men get immersed in the world, they seem to lose all sensations, excepting those necessary to continue or produce life. Amongst the feathered race, whilst the hen keeps the young warm, her mate stays by to cheer her. But it's sufficient for a man to condescend to get a child in order to claim it. A man is a tyrant. Hull, Sunday, June the 14th, 1795. I rather expected to hear from you today. I wish you would not fail to write to me for a little time, because I'm not quite well. Whether I have any good sleep or not, I wake in the morning in violent fits of trembling, and in spite of all my efforts, the child, everything, fatigues me, in which I seek solace or amusement. Mr. Blank forced on me a letter to a physician of this place. It was fortunate, for I should otherwise have had some difficulty to obtain the necessary information. His wife is a pretty woman. I can admire, a pretty woman when I'm alone. And he an intelligent and rather interesting man. They have behaved to me with great hospitality, and poor Fanny was never so happy in her life as amongst their young brood. They took me in their carriage to Beverley, and I ran over my favourite walks with a vivacity that would have astonished you. The town did not please me quite as well as formerly. It appeared so diminutive, and when I found that many of the inhabitants had lived in the same houses ever since I left it, I couldn't help wondering how they could thus have vegetated, whilst I was running over a world of sorrows, snatching at pleasure and throwing off prejudices. The place where I am at present is much improved, but it is astonishing what strides aristocracy and fanaticism have made since I resided in this country. The wind does not appear inclined to change, so I'm still forced to linger. When do you think that you shall be able to set out for France? I do not entirely like the aspect of your affairs, and still less your connections on either side of the water. Often do I sigh when I think of your entanglements in business and your extreme restlessness of mind. Even now I'm almost afraid to ask you whether the pleasure of being free does not overbalance the pain you felt at parting with me. Sometimes I indulge the hope that you will feel me necessary to you, or why should we meet again? But the moment after, despair damps my rising spirits, aggravated by the emotions of tenderness which ought to soften the cares of life. God bless you. Yours sincerely and affectionately, Mary. Sweden, July the 1st, 1795. I labour in vain to calm my mind. My soul has been overwhelmed by sorrow and disappointment. Everything fatigues me. This is a life that cannot last long. It is you who must determine with respect to futurity. And when you have, I will act accordingly. I mean, we must either resolve to live together or part forever. I cannot bear these continual struggles. But I wish you examine carefully your own heart and mind. And if you perceive the least chance of being happier without me than with me, or if your inclination leans capriciously to that side, do not dissemble, but tell me, frankly, that you will never see me more. I will then adopt the plan I mentioned to you, for we must either live together or I will be entirely independent. My heart is so oppressed I cannot write with precision. You know, however, that what I so imperfectly express are not the crude sentiments of the moment. You can only contribute to my comfort by being with me. And if the tenderest friendship is of any value, why will you not look to me for a degree of satisfaction that heartless affections cannot bestow? Tell me then, will you determine to meet me at Basel? I shall, I should imagine, be there before the close of August. And after you settle your affairs at Paris, can we not meet there? God bless you. Yours, Mary. Poor Fanny has suffered during the journey with her teeth. Gothenburg, August the 26th, 1795. I arrived here last night and with the most exquisite delight once more pressed my babe to my heart. We shall part no more. You perhaps cannot conceive the pleasure it gave me to see her run about and play alone. Her increasing intelligence attaches me more and more to her. I've promised her that I will fulfill my duty to her, and nothing in future shall make me forget it. I will also exert myself to obtain an independence for her, but I will not be too anxious on this head. I've already told you that I've recovered my health. Vigour and even vivacity of mind have returned with a renovated constitution. As for peace, we'll not talk of it. I was not made, perhaps, to enjoy the calm contentment so termed. Hamburg, September 27th, 1795. When you receive this, I shall either have landed or be hovering on the British coast. Your letter of the 18th decided me. By what criterion of principle or affection you term my questions extraordinary and unnecessary, I cannot determine. You desire me to decide. I have decided. You must have had long ago 2 letters of mine, which to the same purport. In these, God knows, there was but too much affection, and the agonies of a distracted mind were too faithfully portrayed. What more then had I to say? The negative was to come from you. You had perpetually recurred in your promise of meeting me in the autumn. Was it extraordinary that I should demand a yes or no? Your letter is written with extreme harshness, coldness. In it I find not a trace of the tenderness and humanity, much less of friendship. Only see a desire to heave a load off your shoulders. But I'm above disputing about words. It matters not what in terms you decide. The tremendous power who formed this heart must have foreseen that in a world in which self-interest in various shapes is the principal mobile, I had little chance of escaping misery. To the fiat of fate, I submit. I'm content to be wretched, but I will not be contemptible. Of me you have no cause to complain, but for having had too much regard for you, for having expected a degree of permanent happiness when you only sought for a momentary gratification. Uniting myself to you, your tenderness seemed to make amends for all my former misfortunes. On this tenderness and affection, with what confidence did I rest? But I leaned on a spear, and that has pierced me to the heart. You have thrown off a faithful friend to pursue the caprices of the moment. You certainly are differently organized, for even now, when conviction has been stamped on my soul by sorrow, I can scarcely believe it possible. It depends at present on you whether you will see me or not. I shall take no step till I see or hear from you. Preparing myself for the worst, I've determined, if your next letter be like the last, to write to Mr. Blank and to procure me an obscure lodging, and not to inform anybody of my arrival. There I will endeavour in a few months to obtain the sum necessary to take me to France. From you I will not receive any more. I am not sufficiently humble to depend on your beneficence. Some people whom my unhappiness has interested, though they know not the extent of it, will assist me to attain the object I have in view, which is the independence of my child. Should a peace take place, ready money will go in a great way in France, and I will borrow a sum which my industry shall enable me to pay at my leisure to purchase a small estate for my girl. The assistance I shall find necessary to complete her education I can get at an easy rate in Paris. I can introduce her to such society as she will like, and thus securing for her all chance for happiness. I shall die in peace, persuaded that the felicity which has hitherto cheated my expectation will not always elude my grasp. No poor tempest-tossed mariner ever more earnestly longed to arrive at this port. Mary. Finished.